Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Nick Robin, and I have finally returned from my 3-week East Coast excursion. So I started off in New York, went out into Montauk, which is in Long Island on the water, stayed there for about 4 or 5 days, came back to my box in the city. That following Monday, ended up going to Boston, met up with some old fraternity brothers, and stayed with a girlfriend of mine who was just the best host. So did that, came back, spent a couple more days in New York, went out to East Hampton to see my friend who's coaching baseball, and then finally returned home this past Monday. So it feels great to be back in San Diego. The weather hasn't changed, of course. New York was great and all, but thunderstorms in August aren't ideal, to say the least. So I'm back in the studio. There's no more ambiance or outside noise from the bustle and hustle of the city, so that's good to hear. And we are just getting to the end of the seeding games here. So on today's show, Damien Lillard continues his revenge tour and now controls his own destiny. After, I will discuss the best players from the bubble and who is most likely to take home the seeding MVP. And on Nick's picks, the best left-handers in NBA history. But first, I'm going to take a look at the hottest team in the NBA, the Phoenix Suns. To begin, the Suns came into the restart six full games behind Memphis. So they basically had to go perfect, which they have so far with a 130-116 win yesterday against Philadelphia. They're now 7-0. And yesterday, Booker had his 91st 30-point game, breaking a tie with Walter Davis for the most in franchise history. From a games perspective, Booker's only played 340, Walter Davis 767 games. So in less than half the amount of career games for the Suns, Booker has already become the leading scorer in 30-point games. Pretty impressive for a guy who, throughout his career, has just been looked at as a good stats, bad team player, but come to the bubble, he's finally realized his winning ways. And it's not just Booker. DeAndre Ayton, who missed 25 of the first 26 games of the season due to a PED suspension, has averaged 15.5 points and 9.5 rebounds. However, he has struggled, like he has throughout his young career, to get to the line. For a big man, this is very uncommon. He's only averaging 1.3 free throw attempts per game, which for a guy who should be playing more in the paint and drawing more contact, it's very concerning. So the Suns now are 7-0. They sit half game behind Portland, who won last night in a thrilling contest that we'll get to later on. And they've done this with all without their second leading scorer, Kelly Oubre, averaging a little over 18.5 points a game. He's been out since February 24th with a knee injury. So the Suns have been the best team in the bubble. They've had contributions from all over, from Cameron Johnson, an unheralded rookie out of North Carolina who's become a staple in their starting lineup, as well as one of their best three-point shooters. Dario Saric, Sarge, has shot over 50% from three in the bubble, along with Cameron Payne, a giveaway from the Thunder, and Javon Carter, who has also been another great shooter for them. But it goes without saying that they haven't received some help from the teams they're playing. So outside of Shake Milton, the 76ers were without all their other starters. Joel Embiid out with a left ankle injury, Tobias Harris, sore right ankle, and Al Horford, sore left knee, and of course, Ben Simmons, who injured himself a couple games ago and is out indefinitely, and then Josh Richardson got some rest. So they were basically playing the C team of the 76ers. So a win would have been anything but a win would have been disappointing. But either way, at the end of the day, you have to just go out and play who's ever in front of you, and that's what the Suns have done. It has been a remarkable run, and I would love, and I think most NBA fans would love to see this team continue their run, at least into the play-in game, where potentially they could face either the San Antonio Spurs, the Memphis Grizzlies, or more than likely the Portland Trail Blazers. And let's look at how the Suns are doing this all. So here are their team stats in the bubbles. Let's start with their offensive rankings. They're fifth in scoring, 121.4 points per game. Jesus, I can't believe that's only fifth. Like 121 points per game would have been tops in the NBA prior to the restart. So the trend in the bubble is that teams are scoring at a crazy pace. Just looking at the Suns, who rank fifth, as I mentioned, at 121 points a game. Their second field goal percentage, fifth in three-point percentage at 40%. They have 5 players shooting 38-plus from behind the arc. Javon Carter, Cameron Payne, Dario Saric, Mikal Bridges, and Ricky Rubio. But out of the 22 teams, they only rank 16th in three-point attempts, which looking at this roster, like, you got to take more than the 16th most threes out of 22 teams. You got to be in that 1 through 10 range. If you're making them at 40%, you might as well take more threes, because we all know 3 is more than 2. As simple as that. It took basketball personnel's years to kind of figure that out, that it's better to take a 3 than it is to take a long 2. Very simple. They've also, and this is impressive, depending on how the next couple games go, or the last game, they will finish number 1 in NBA history in highest free throw percentage at 83.3%. So just because you make your free throws doesn't mean you're going to win games, as proven by the Suns, because they're 33-39, but they're about to go into the NBA record books as the highest free throw percentage team in the history of the league. So despite this obscure record, it doesn't always result in wins. But they are shooting now nearly 92% as a team in the bubble, which is by far number 1 out of all 22 teams. Now, looking at the defensive side of the ball, they're third in defensive rating at 107.45. So per 100 possessions, they give up about 107 points. Third out of the 22 teams. They're second in rebounding at 47.4 per game, and they're first in second chance points allowed, and tied for fourth with fewest turnovers. So as simple as that. In winning games, rebound the ball at a high percentage, don't allow second chance points because those kill you, and don't turn over the ball, which the Suns have done a great job of preventing. So, yeah, basketball, it can be a very complicated game, but at the end of the day, rebound the ball and don't turn it over. And the Suns have done a great job of protecting the ball, getting rebounds, and scoring at a high level very efficiently. Just looking at their three-point percentage along with the number 2 field goal percentage in the bubble. So kudos to Devin Booker and the Suns that have finally proven that he can win. moving on, and this is where we get into the Booker Files, a.k.a. the Devin Booker Fan Club. Their only member, me, Nick Robin. And Devin Booker not only looks like he could be the fourth Jonas brother, but the guy can straight out ball. I did a little bit player comparison to active greats. So Booker in comparison to Damian Lillard, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Stephen Curry at their age 23 season. Booker ranks first in points per game. He's second in field goal percentage, only .002 percentage behind Stephen Curry. Free throw percentage first, and assist first. Pretty impressive for guys like James Harden, who ends up, and Russell Westbrook, who will both go on into their career to lead the league in assists. Booker has shown that he's a better playmaker than both of them at this stage in his career. And now looking at the postseason problem that a lot of critics point out to Booker. So Curry did not even make his first postseason until he was 24 years old. Players and teams take time to develop. But look at Curry now. He's a 3-time champion, 5 consecutive finals appearances, and again, did not make the postseason until he was 24. Booker has had, to say a tough organization situation would be an understatement. He's now on his 5th head coach in 4 years, and since Mike D'Antoni left in 2008, the Suns have gone through 8 head coaches. That's nearly one every 1.5 seasons. And then to begin the season, Ayton had a 25-game suspension, so that did take a hit at their record. And now looking at a comparison, Booker is an up-and-coming Damian Lillard, except he's 6'5". They both have outrageous range and confidence, willing to just rip it from 30 feet plus. And then team success, Booker's had less weapons than Lillard's Blazers, who had LaMarcus Aldridge early on in his career, Wesley Matthews, Nicola Batum, and more stability from an organization standpoint. Terry Stotts is the only head coach Lillard has ever known in his professional career. And looking at this could be the start of a great rivalry in the Pacific Northwest Division. Booker's Suns versus Lillard's Blazers. And both of these players throughout their career never got enough dues. However, Lillard is getting his now as he looks to be the presumptive bubble MVP. So it took Lillard a while to get his respect from the other players in the league. But as we've seen, especially now in the bubble, people are starting to look at Damian Lillard as one of the best players in the league, potentially a top 5 player in the NBA. And back to the comparison to a lot of these players, James Harden, started off his career in Oklahoma City with Durant and Westbrook, was able to get some playoff success under his belt, making a finals early on. Same goes to Westbrook, a teammate of Harden. And then Curry, as we looked at, took a little bit longer to develop, especially the team around him. And Booker's situation, I think it has a lot to do with the organization. It's just a poorly ran organization right now. And I think with the pieces they've accumulated, they're going to continue to get better over these next couple of years. So I think it's too harsh to judge Booker right now. The guy is only 23 years old. He's already in his 5th year in the NBA. This guy could technically still be in college at 23 years old. He'd be an old senior, but he could still be in college. So how do the Suns get into the playoffs? As I mentioned, they have the remaining play-in contenders are the Memphis Grizzlies, San Antonio Spurs, Suns, and Blazers. The Blazers hold a half-game lead over the other 3 mentioned teams. For the Suns to get in, all they need is to beat Dallas on Thursday and have either the Blazers lose against Brooklyn or Memphis lose against Milwaukee. So they're still not in control of their own destiny, but all they need to do is go out and win one more game. And that brings me to Booker's quote of the day from Paulio Uggetti from The Ringer. He tweeted, start quote, "We didn't come in saying we wanted to win 8 games in a row. We said we wanted to win one game 8 times. And that's what the Suns have done. They're 7-0, going for win number 8 against the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic, who we'll get into later on in this episode when we look at the all-seeding NBA team. And after this break, we are going to talk about Dame Dollar's revenge tour, what he's done over the last couple games, and we will take a look at something that only him and Wilt Chamberlain have accomplished in NBA history. More on that after this commercial break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
This past Saturday, Damian Lillard, known as one of the clutchest players in the NBA, missed 2 free throws and a potential game-tying 3 in the final 20 seconds in a 122-117 loss to the LA Clippers. That's not where the story ends. Patrick Beverley, who's known as the biggest shit talker in the NBA, sometimes backs up with his plays, other times doesn't. He's half the player that most of these other superstars are, but he's definitely a guy I would want on my team. Someone that you love to root for when he's on your team and hate to see him on the other side. So Damian Lillard misses the 2 free throws, and Patrick Beverley, who's on the bench, shouts, "It's Dame time," in reference to Damian Lillard's catchphrase, if we call it, that he's gone by over the last several seasons. But that just kind of shows the respect that he's gained from his peers, such as Patrick Beverley and Paul George. And there's been a little bit of beef between these 3 players, particularly Damian Lillard and Paul George. The beef all started after Saturday's game when Damian Lillard was quoted as saying, start quote, asking me about Patrick Beverley, who I sent home before at the end of a game. Paul George just got sent home by me last year in the playoffs, so they know that the reason they reacting like that is because of what they expect from me, which is a sign of respect, end quote. So that was posted on Bleacher Report's Instagram account, which then Patrick Beverley commented, Cancun on 3, laughing emoji, laughing emoji, laughing emoji, and then Paul George, also known as YG Tress, said, and you getting sent home this year, respect, fist up. Damian Lillard then went back at Paul George, commenting below, saying, keep switching teams, ... running from the grind, period, you boys is chumps. So Paul George didn't particularly like that. Referencing the shots, so in 2014, in Damian Lillard's first postseason appearance, he hit a 3 to send Patrick Beverley and the Rockets home, winning the series 4-2. Last year, Paul George was playing for Oklahoma City. Damian Lillard hits a 3 to win Game 5, nearly from half court, resulted in the now infamous quote from Paul George saying, he's just taking bad shots. He's taking bad shots, I guess, in a sense, but he's making those bad shots, and he sent you guys home last year. So that got me into thinking Paul George clapped back at Damian Lillard, saying, I took the Pacers farther than you've ever taken I've had more success with the Pacers than you've had at the Blazers. So it got me into thinking what the comparison between these two players. And the one thing we do have to say about Damian Lillard is the guy is loyal. He's never tried to chase rings. He's never tried recruiting other players, other superstars to his team. So you got to respect that. So let's look at Pacers playoff experience versus Damian Lillard's playoff pedigree with the Blazers. So Paul George with the Pacers had 2 Eastern Conference appearances in 13 and 14. Both years he lost to the Heat in 7 and 6 games respectively. They once again lost to the Heat in 6 games in 2012 in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And in his entire Pacers career, he only lost in the first round once. But going away from just the Pacers playoff background, he does now have 2 first-round exits with OKC over the last 2 years, including one to Damian Lillard and the Blazers. So Damian Lillard, he made his first Western Conference Finals appearance last year. Unfortunately, he was swept by the Warriors. And looking at the Blazers, they played in the Western Conference, which has always been known to being tougher than the Eastern Conference. But Paul George had to go up against LeBron James, the Miami Heat. But Damian Lillard had to go up against the Warriors and their juggernaut with Curry, Durant, Draymond, and Klay Thompson. They played the Warriors in 16, 17, and 19. Paul George played the Heat in 2012, 13, and 14. So they both ran into dynasties in the making during their respective playoff runs. But to say that Paul George had that much more success than Damian Lillard in the playoffs, I mean, it's a toss-up at that point. Damian Lillard has been bounced in the first round 3 times, in 15, in 17 by the Warriors, and 18 by the New Orleans Pelicans with Anthony Davis. Paul George, 1 first-round exit in 2011, his playoff debut, and then the 2 first-round exits over the last 2 seasons with OKC. So they're basically on equal level here. And it's really a toss-up to who's had the better postseason career, but neither of these guys have come close to winning a championship. Neither has made a finals appearance. But I got to tip my cap to Damian Lillard, as he's done this all with one team. He's never tried to leave. He's always been true to himself when it's come to his playoff success. But this beef has kind of taken us away from what Damian Lillard has done in the last 2 games. So, repeat. He misses 2 free throws and a potential game-tying 3 against the Clippers. Following those 2 missed free throws, Lillard has put up the following stat line while putting his team 1 win away from clinching a spot in the play-in game. So game number 1, after the Clippers game, versus the 76ers, he puts up 51 points, 7 assists, winning 124-121. He's 16-28 from the field, 4-12 from 3, misses 1 free throw. The next game, versus the Mavericks, he goes 17-32, 9-17 from behind the arc, and a perfect 18 of 18 from the line for 61 points, 8 assists, and a 134-131 win versus the Mavericks. So, to put that into perspective, he has missed 1 free throw since missing 2 free throws in the Clippers game. 1 free throw out of 34 attempts. His stats over the last 2 games, he's averaged 56 points a game on 55 from the field, 68 from 3, and 97% from the free throw line. And for good company, he's averaged 7.5 assists. Here's your fun fact of the day. Only 2 NBA players have ever scored 60 points 3 times in one season. One of them being Wilt Chamberlain, and the other being Damian Lillard. Put it into perspective, Wilt Chamberlain averaged 50 points for an entire season. I'm guessing that's the year when he had 60 points more than 3 times. I'm guessing he's done that multiple times in his career. But Damian Lillard, only other player to match the great Wilt Chamberlain. Put this into perspective for a sec. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, James Harden, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. These players have never scored 60 or more 3 or more times this season, but Damian Lillard has. A guy standing at only 6'2", went to small Weber State, became a first-round draft pick, and has proven the doubters wrong at every point of his career. Yes, he hasn't won the championship yet, hasn't made a finals appearance, but at only 30 years old, Damian Lillard still has time to rewrite his legacy. And these are the types of players we like to see in the NBA. Guys who don't switch teams, go against what is now the norm in forming your own super team. While Damian Lillard has been loyal to Portland and has paid dividends for them, as they've been a constant in the playoffs throughout the last decade. And although it has been a rough season, they look primed to be making at least the play-in game this year. And at this point, they control their own destiny. The Grizzlies, Spurs, and Suns all sit half a game behind them in the standings. All Portland has to do is go out and take care of business against a Brooklyn team who's missing 4 of their top 5 players. DeAndre Jordan, nowhere to be found. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Spencer Dinwiddie have all been out. However, they have been a surprising 5-2 in the bubble. Or all 3 teams, Grizzlies, Spurs, and Suns, could lose, still clinching that A seed for Portland. And looking past the play-in game, the Portland Trailblazers, with the additions of Nurkic and Zach Collins, have a realistic chance of taking down the Lakers. The Lakers have nobody to guard Lillard or McCollum, or I guess you could put Danny Green on one of those two, but then who's guarding the other player? Be honest, it's not really an ideal first-round matchup for the Lakers. I mean, the last thing you want to do is face last year's Western Conference Final participant when you could be facing either the Suns or the Memphis Grizzlies. But the way the Portland Trailblazers are playing, looks like they're going to potentially steal the 8th seed. But looking at the Suns in terms of who they played, like the Suns, yes, they're 7-0. They played awesome. Devin Booker has been unreal, averaging over 30 points a game. They're by far the most exciting team so far in the bubble and a feel-good story for the season. I mean, imagine if they got the play-in game, won, somehow upset the Lakers, made the finals. I mean, let's not get carried away. That's not going to happen. But looking at who the Suns have played in the bubble, they beat a Heat team without Jimmy Butler. Still good win, but their best player was missing. They beat a Thunder team without Steven Adams, Danilo Gallinari, Dennis Schroeder, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So 4 of their best 5 players. And then last night, they beat a 76ers team without Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Josh Richardson, and Al Horford. So yes, the Suns' 7-0 run is impressive. They lead the NBA in point differential at over 11.3 margin of victory. But at the same time, they're playing teams that are resting players for the playoffs, teams that have already solidified their playoff position. So as impressive as it is that they've gone 7-0 and have the potential to go 8-0, I just don't see them beating Portland, especially 2 games in a row. Portland came to the season, injuries. Joseph Nurkic did not come back until the bubble. Zach Collins injured himself early on in the season. They had Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, but I mean, really, it's like they didn't have much front court depth to begin with or to play with during the early part of the season. So I'm going to take the Portland Trailblazers to make the 8th seed and play the Lakers and honestly take them to 6-7 games, possibly even win the series. I mean, this is a scary Portland Trailblazers team, and Dame Dollar has come, he's shown up, and he's talked the talk, but he's also walked the walk, which he's done throughout his career. So it's going to be interesting how these next couple days play out, but we're all excited to watch it. So next on the GSMC podcast, I will look at the all-seeding teams and who should be named the bubble MVP. Stay tuned for that and more after this commercial break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back now on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just got done checking out the Damian Lillard Revenge Tour, and he has been absolutely on fire. Back-to-back 50-point games, including a 61-point game last night against the Dallas Mavericks. And he became only the second player in NBA history, yes, only the second player in NBA history to record 3 or more 60-point games in a single season. Him and Wilt Chamberlain, that's the list, nobody else. So now we're going to go into the All-NBA seeding team. Anthony Davis got off to a hot start with the Los Angeles Lakers. James Harden's had some great games. Joel Embiid was on fire before his injury. Kristaps Porzingis is really coming to his own, averaging 25 and 10. But none of these guys are on my All-NBA seeding team. So let us begin. And as always, we're going positionless because that's the type of game the NBA is nowadays. You can put out 5 guards on the court if one of them's tall enough. I mean, look at the Rockets not starting a player over the height of 6'7". It can be done, and it can provide victories. But let me begin my first team players, starting with Luka Doncic. So his team hasn't had the same success as other players on this list, but he's averaged a triple-double. He's recorded 3 triple-doubles, leading all players. He ranks 3rd in scoring with 32 points a game, tied for 3rd in rebounding at 11.2, and leads all players in assists at 11.3 per game. He also became the youngest player with a 30-point, 20-rebound triple-double in NBA history at only 21 years and 158 days old. So yeah, his team's only 3-4. They did blow 2 leads in their first 2 games with the Rockets, which was a shootout. Both teams nearly scored into the 150s. And then the Suns, who, as we talked about earlier, are 7-0 and find themselves in contention for the play-in game in the Western Conference. So Luka Doncic, my first player on the all-seeding team, and this guy, he's just incredible. Like, he's 21 years old. He was somehow taken 5th in last year's NBA draft. 5th. 4 guys went ahead of Luka Doncic, who might make claim, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but in the years to come, as the best player in the NBA. A combination of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Quite a compliment. Maybe an outlandish compliment. But in only his second year, he's leading the Mavericks back to the playoffs for the first time since 2016. And he is the main reason why. He is the engine that makes everything go. Without him, this team would be near the bottom of the Western Conference. Next up, someone that we've already spoken about heavily throughout this podcast, Damian Lillard. And he leads the NBA in scoring, 37 points a game on 41% from 3, and 89% from the free throw line. He leads the NBA in 3-pointers per game at 5.1, third in the NBA in assists with nearly 9.5. And as I mentioned, back-to-back 50-plus point games, along with a 45-point game earlier in the bubble. And right now, he's the hottest player in the world. The guy cannot be stopped. He's been the unspoken leader of this Blazers team since the minute he was drafted, winning Rookie of the Year his first year, making a first-team All-NBA last year. This guy is unbelievable, and people continue to doubt him, and he continues to prove people wrong. Damian Lillard is the closest thing the league has seen to Kobe Bryant. He carries his heart on his sleeve. He's emotional. He's not afraid to say what needs to be said, and he backs it up time and time again. And it's great to see a player like Damian Lillard be one of the faces of this league. He is incredible. He does not get enough credit, and similar to Devin Booker, has been looked down upon throughout his career, but he's finally getting the credit he deserves. The best part about last night and the victory over the Mavericks, a comeback led by Damian Lillard in the fourth quarter, hit 3 after 3 to get themselves back in the game, got a few stops along the way, but now that they beat the Mavericks last night, they control their destiny. They beat Brooklyn, which, hey, Brooklyn's been no walkover. They're 5-2 in the bubble. Everyone thought it was a joke, the roster they were putting out, but the team continues to win. So the Blazers beat the Nets. They clinched the 8th seed, and all they have to do is win 1 out of 2 games, and they find themselves facing off against the Lakers, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, and it's going to be an interesting first round matchup, and all the pressure is going to be on the Lakers. The Blazers were an afterthought. No one even thought they were going to make the playoffs coming into they were one of the favorites to make the playoffs coming into the bubble, but the team was 8-9 games under 500, and now they're going in 4 or 5 games under 500, going up against the number 1 seeded Lakers, and honestly, they have a realistic shot on taking them down. This isn't the juggernaut of the Warriors of the last couple of years where no one stood a chance. Everyone is beatable. So that's the best part about this year's playoffs. It's not just one team that's just going to run through it all and go 15-1 or 16-1. There could be some upsets, especially in this bubble atmosphere. The no crowds. LeBron James already came out recently this week saying how he's still getting adjusted. Not to say he is, but using it as an excuse for later on if the Lakers do get upset in the first or second round. He's always thinking, always saying. The thing about LeBron James is he always speaks his truth. I'd say he's pretty real. He doesn't back down from anyone, similar to Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard, I would say, is a little more in your face about it, but LeBron James, he's an emotional player, and he says truthfully what is on his mind. So Damian Lillard's second player on the all-seeding team. Moving on to the third player, and another guy we've spoken about highly today, Devin Booker. His team, 7-0. And as I mentioned earlier, they have had some luck along the way. Jimmy Butler sat out in their game against the Heat. Nearly the whole team sat out when they played the 76ers. And when they played OKC, nearly every starter outside of Chris Paul was also taking some rest. But at the end of the day, you have to play who's in front of you, and that's what the Suns have done. They've come out and beaten every team that they've had to play. And in the bubble, Devin Booker is averaging 31 points a game on 49% from the field, 35% from 3, and 94% from the line. The guy does not miss from the charity stripe. And he's tied for 4th in scoring with TJ Warren. And the only guys he trails are Harden, Lillard, and Doncic. And of course, he has the bubble moment of the year probably with the game winner versus the Clippers with Paul George and Kawhi right in his face, which got Draymond Green to kiss the sun, saying that Devin Booker needs to get out of Phoenix. It's bad for his career. But, hey, Devin Booker's 23 years old. he has a strong team around him right now. DeAndre Ayton, number 1 overall pick in last year's draft. Cam Johnson, who's been a surprise starter for them this year. Dario Saric has been a great guy off the bench. Kelly Oubre, still young, 24, 25 years old. This team has the pieces to be successful. And hey, if they don't make the first round, they'll get a lottery pick out of it, which could just go further to helping this team develop. Again, the guy's only 23 years old. Curry did not even make his first postseason appearance until he was 24. And he turned out okay. So I think Devin Booker and the Suns, they need to give each other a couple more seasons. And the guy's still locked in a huge contract, so he's got plenty of time to prove. And, well, I guess Phoenix has plenty of time to prove to Devin Booker that they are worth sticking around for. So Devin Booker, my next guy, my all seeding team. Moving on, and no surprise here, Giannis Antakanopo. His team record, iffy, 3-4. He did miss a game, but just get this, in less than 26 minutes of play, he's averaging nearly 28 points a game, 12 rebounds, which leads the NBA, and 4.2 assists. He's shooting a ridiculous 62% from the field. The three-point shot still isn't there, but this guy is an absolute monster. And yeah, they don't have the same pressure going into these games as they've basically taken care of their spot in the Eastern Conference. So I don't think when players don't have something really to play for and they're just playing games to play them, they don't have that same intensity. Giannis hasn't let up, though. Although his team has dropped some games, he does have 4 30-point double-doubles in only 6 outings. So the guy can put up numbers in his sleep. And let's talk about last night, though. In last night's game against the winless Washington Wizards, Giannis was ejected for headbutting Mo Wagner. Giannis, what are you doing? They have no wins. They are the doormat of the NBA. Why? If you're going to headbutt someone, at least let it be a team that's worth headbutting. The Wizards are atrocious. Yes, they got invited due to the fact that Bradley Beal was supposed to play, which he didn't. But now they find themselves 0-7. And yes, I know they're trying hard. Everyone out here is trying hard. But yes, it's not worth an ejection and a headbutt on Mo Wagner and the Wizards. Save it for a team that's more worth your time. Now, my last player, and probably the most surprising player in the bubble, and that is TJ Warren of the Indiana Pacers. CC Warren, cash consideration since the Suns gave him away for cash. No players, and the guy is on another planet right now. 31 points per game, shooting 58% from the field and 52% from three. He started off hot with 53 points versus a healthy 76ers without the 3 top players for the Pacers. They were missing Jeremy Lamb, Brogdon, and Sabonis. And Sabonis and Jeremy Lamb have not even made it onto the floor yet. And the Pacers still find themselves 4-2, a very respectable record. Victor Oladipo is still working himself back into playing condition. And I put TJ Warren on the first team over James Harden just because I believe he's been more important to his team. The Rockets still have Russell Westbrook. Yes, I know they are missing Eric Gordon, but the Pacers are missing 3 of their top 4 or 5 players, and TJ Warren has really stepped up, averaging 31 a game. 31 a game for a guy who's typically around 18 to 20 a game. Don't know what happened, but TJ Warren is the last spot on my all-NBA seeding team. Which just brings us lastly to the MVP. And it's 2 guys right now. It's Devin Booker and it's Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard has been on fire since the 2 missed free throws against the Clippers. But I think it really just comes down to these last 2 games. The Blazers versus the 5-2 Nets. The Suns versus 3-4 Mavericks. And if Booker wins, you have to give it to the best player on the undefeated team. Despite how great Lillard has been, Devin Booker has been the one constant on this Suns team. The Blazers, they still have Gary Trent Jr., who's been scorching hot, hitting nearly 60% of his threes. They have Nurkic back. They have Zach Collins. The Suns, really outside of Devin Booker, he's their only player even close to an all-star level. Yes, maybe Ayton will get there one day, but Devin Booker is by far the best player on the Suns. And I forgot to mention, the Blazers also have another guy in the backcourt, CJ McCollum, who's been an all-star a couple times. So yes, Devin Booker, if he can win tomorrow's game against the Mavericks, he is my choice for the Bubble MVP. You've heard it here first on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Devin Booker, if they win tomorrow, should and will be the NBA Bubble MVP. Now, moving on, after this commercial break, everybody's favorite segment, Nick's Picks, and today we are looking at the best left-handed players in NBA history. Stay tuned for that after this commercial break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to Nick's Picks, where we discuss our top fives in everything basketball, to who are the 5 greatest players of all time, to who have the best afros in NBA history, as we did last week. And now today we are doing the best left-handed players in NBA history. And I don't know why, but there's just something smoother about watching a lefty play the game of basketball. The slightly unorthodox shooting form to the sudden diversion of the norm where a lefty gets the ball and starts his slightly different than norm move. There's just something poetic about it. So let's start right now let's actually begin with our current lefty greats in the game. So we have D'Angelo Russell of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who's a great young point guard. Was a first-time All-Star last year, had a little bit of a setback playing for the Golden State Warriors, but still has a bright future ahead of him. Next, we have the 5'9" Isaiah Thomas, one of the most prolific scorers under 6 foot in NBA history. Too bad some hip injuries have taken away from his scoring ability, but did have some great seasons in Boston until he was devastatingly traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's kind of gone downhill from that. Next up, we have Mike Connolly Jr. And honestly, one of the more underrated players in the NBA. Spent the majority of his career with the Memphis Grizzlies until this season when he was traded to the Utah Jazz, and he's had a great resurgence during the bubble. And lastly, Ben Simmons. Unfortunately, you don't get to see him use that pretty jumper too much because the 3-point to his game is still a work in progress, but he's still young and still has time to turn it on. But he's more of a lefty Magic Johnson with the great passing ability and very solid on the defensive end as well. So those are some of our current lefty greats in the game. Now moving on to honorable mention. And the first guy that comes to mind is Chris Mullin. Effortless flick of the wrist, very smooth jumper, and was a 5-time All-Star, a member of the 1992 Dream Team, and one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. Spent his spent the majority of his career with the Warriors as well as the Indiana Pacers, where he did make a late Eastern Conference Finals appearance against the 98 Bulls, who lost in a devastating Game 7. So Chris Mullin, my honorable mention for the best left-handed players of all time. Moving on to number 5, Manu Ginobili. Just a 2-time All-Star, 2008 Sixth Man of the Year award winner, but a 4-time NBA champion. Part of that Spurs dynasty that continues to go to this day. An amazing teammate and someone who kind of brought the Euro step to the NBA. So not only did he have the nice lefty touch, but also brought one of the most popular moves to the National Basketball Association. Manu Ginobili, number 5 on my list of best left-handed players of all time. Next, number 4, Chris Bosh. And for many of us, we'll just remember Chris Bosh as that third player on the Miami Heat's iconic Big Three. Of course, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, went to 4 straight NBA Finals, won 2 championships. But some of his best, most productive years came in Toronto, averaging 20 points in 5 consecutive seasons. Although he had to officially retire early due to a blood clot that was found in his lungs and left leg. Very unfortunate, though. Chris Bosh still had plenty of productive years left on him. But he does make my list. Number 4, best left-handed player of all time. Next, number 3, the Admiral, David Robinson. He was part of the 1992 Dream Team, a 10-time NBA All-Star, and a 1995 MVP, a 2-time Olympic and NBA champion. 1999 and 2003 brought home the title and brought home the gold in 92 and 96. Arguably one of the fastest, most athletic centers in NBA history. He was more of a small forward at the center position. A Navy grad who was able to open the floor with his effective mid-range game. And one of only 4 players in NBA history to score 70 or more in a game, the others being Kobe, Bean Bryant, Wilt Chamberlain, and a theme of this podcast, Devin Booker. Besides the offensive game, he was also one of the best defensive players in the league, winning the award in 1992. He spent the entirety of his career with the Spurs, which you can't say much for players these days, but you got to still respect the loyalty that the players of the 90s had over today's younger generation. Next, the all-time scorer for left-handed players, James Harden. He's won the league MVP in 2018 and has been a runner-up 4 different times. People have different opinions on James Harden, maybe more due to the fact that he only scores in 2 ways, hitting 3-pointers and getting to the free throw line, kind of flopping to draw contact, but I mean, really, who in the league does not attempt to do that every once in a while? Especially the game I was watching last night. Damian Lillard is a tremendous scorer and basketball player, but there were several plays where he went up for a 3 and tried to draw contact on a player, and honestly, it's just a sloppy way to play basketball, but that's how the game is played, and we might hate it, kind of like that hack a Shaq rule, but hopefully the NBA can do something to alleviate that problem. So again, earlier this season, James Harden became the number 1 all-time scorer for left-handed players, passing none other than number 3 on my list, David Robinson. Yes, there was a method to my madness on why I put James Harden ahead of 2-time champion David Robinson. Let's begin there. First off, that 1999 championship was won in a strike-shortened season. Not saying it doesn't make it any more difficult, but David Robinson more won championships due to the fact that he got a guy like Tim Duncan on his team. And we can say in 1999 that Tim Duncan was right around, if not better than David Robinson. And then in 2003, David Robinson was more in a reserved role for the Spurs. So yes, he is a two-time champion, but he was never the best player on either the 1999 or 2003 team. And James Harden, he still has a lot of a career left to play. He's already a 6-time All-Star, 7-time All-Star, will make an All-NBA team once again, probably will finish in the top 3 in MVP voting for the 5th or 6th time in his career. The guy is a tremendous talent, but in order to catch the guy at number 1 on my list, he needs to rack up a couple championships. And moving on to number 1, Bill Russell. Most people wouldn't even know that he is a lefty because, first off, he played over 50 years ago, and nobody remembers basketball from back then because it wasn't even really a popular sport in the fact that the finals were on tape delay. Yes, you would watch a finals 3 to 4 hours after the game has actually ended in real time because it was so unpopular that sitcoms were beating out the NBA Finals. Nobody wanted to watch it. Nevertheless, Bill Russell is the champion of all champions. He is one of only 7 players to ever win the grand prize in college, NBA, and Olympics. He won 72% of his NBA regular season games and is defined as possibly the greatest winner in professional sports and the best defensive player in the NBA. Catch this fact. He averaged more than 20 rebounds in 10 straight seasons. Nobody will ever accomplish that feat. Last player to even average 20 rebounds in a single season was Wilt Chamberlain in 1968-69, the year after Bill Russell retired. So yeah, I don't see anyone averaging 20 rebounds in a single season, let alone in 10 consecutive seasons. And looking back more recently, the last player to even get close to averaging 20 rebounds a game was Dennis Rodman in 1991-92 when he averaged 18.66 for the Detroit Pistons. It was a different game then, a lot more shots, and let's be frank, Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell were a minority amongst the league at that time. Not many black players for obvious reasons of what was going on back then. We're still seeing it today. But yeah, nobody will ever accomplish some of the things that guys like Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain have. But there you go. My top 5 left-handed players of all time. Number 5, Manu Ginobili. Number 4, Chris Bosh. Number 3, David Robinson. Number 2, James Harden. And number 1, the ultimate winner, Bill Russell. So today's now been my 14th episode for the GSMC basketball podcast. Not sure if I've gotten any better in the weeks leading up to now. And honestly, it is tough. It is a full day process trying to speak for an hour by yourself on the podcast. It's great. I mean, honestly, I think it's great practice right now during the pandemic. Hopefully something I can speak about in my job interviews. But thank you for all of you that have tuned in thus far. Again, only going to get better as this goes. And exciting to see the end of the bubble seeding games this Friday with the playoffs beginning as early as Monday. So stay tuned for more basketball, for more stories on the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you always by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you as always for tuning in. Again, I'm your host, Nick Robin. Please leave us some comments on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Spotify. We always love to hear from our fans. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.